Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I really appreciate you joining us today as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are making Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. I was looking at some of the metrics this morning on social media, and the amount of engagement with this show continues to grow dramatically. I really appreciate so many people engaging with the show, listening to it on SuperTalk or SuperTalk TV at C Spire TV or your favorite podcast, or so many ways to engage this show. I really want to encourage you to download the SuperTalk Mississippi app. The news team is providing news to 50 radio stations across the state of Mississippi, and including that app. And they're leading the way as it relates to news in Mississippi, just doing a great job. Hey, before we get to our guest, I wanted to read a couple of quotes to you. Here's one from a guy by the name of John C. Maxwell. For people who don't know that name, he was actually a New York Times bestseller. He's an author, coach. He's a speaker. He's written over 24 million. He's sold over 24 million books in 50 languages. But he said about leadership, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. I always thought that was a really good one. Another one I wanted to share with you from Warren Benes, and this guy was also a lecturer. He worked with U.S. presidents, including John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan. But he said leadership is the capacity to translate into a vision into reality. Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Another one, this is actually from a philosopher from China. And he said this: there are three essentials to leadership: humility, clarity, and courage. I love that one. Humility, clarity, and courage. And the last one I'll share is from Ralph Waldo Emerson. I'm a big fan of his. He said, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Well, all of these attributes are shared by my next guest, John Hairston, the CEO of Hancock Whitney, and a dear friend that I've worked with in the community for a number of years. But John definitely is a guy who goes about his leadership role in the community or at the banks with humility, clarity, and courage. It's something to watch this amazing dude do his work. Anyway, without any further ado, let me welcome John Hairston back to my show. How you doing, John?
Very well, Ricky. Thanks for the extravagant warm up. And one thing I'll say about humility is people who can exhibit humility are the ones who made enough mistakes to be humble. I think it's an acquired skill sometimes.
Hey, listen, I talk about that a lot because I had the opportunity to talk to people who are successful in the community or successful in their work or successful in their lives. And I would say probably the most important thing that I get from them, and I'll repeat it sort of the way that I say it, and that is that life is a journey. It's a journey of discovery, actually, of self-discovery, and that we know the more we learn, the more we better learn how much we don't know. And at the end of the day, it's that keeps us humble and keeps us wanting to learn more. We wouldn't learn if we wouldn't make mistakes. I mean, making mistakes is the key to success, isn't it?
Well, it's how you build character, and it's how you build wisdom and knowledge. And when it gets to courage, and I know as we were talking pre-show today about some of our Hurricane Katrina experiences, when you get to courage, the old Western movies, a lot of times the plot would have the hero in the story maybe not exhibiting enough courage through the show until it really counted there towards the end of the show with the build-up, and they exhibited all that courage. And I think maybe sometimes community leadership is the same. You don't have to be courageous every moment of every day, but when it counts, when it really matters, you have to be prepared to maybe take a little flack to stand for something that's going to be meaningful for decades in the future. And some of those we got done in Katrina, some we probably could have pushed a little harder, but all in all, I think the community did a magnificent job recovering from, well, at that time was the worst natural disaster we'd ever had in the history of the country.
Yeah, I agree. John, I'd be interested to hear this from you. As we were chatting about that before the show started, we saw so much together. We were shoulder to shoulder through so much challenge and change and opportunity. We saw, in our brethren in the leadership world, we saw some amazing people kind of do their thing. Yeah. I feel like I'm more complete as a human being today because of that experience. There's nothing we can do to change the fact that it happened. But gosh, I feel fortunate that I was there to learn those valuable lessons I'm a better person today because of that.
I agree, and I feel the same way, Ricky. And in fact, I think the Katrina story, and maybe the stories of some of the people that were really the leaders of that recovery, those are the stories that you use to help develop the next generation to be prepared for the types of obstacles that come. Hopefully, not hurricanes of that nature, but there's always bad news, and how you deal with it is, I think, what separates good from great sometimes. And so I share with when we're doing young leaders in banking. Just did it 2 weeks ago at the LSU Graduate School of Banking, where you're telling the story of Katrina, and this was, uniquely was our company's experience with that, is trying to exhibit the need to have a culture that's and you understand your values, because you may not be able to communicate sometimes as well during different disasters. But if everybody understands how we measure good judgment versus not, they're generally going to make decisions right 90 or 95% of the time, even if you don't have an effective chain of command because of communication outage.
Well, you look back at your career, and we can retrace a little bit of those steps for people who have not heard you and me talk before. But you think about where you were in your development at Hancock Bank when Hurricane Katrina hit, your background as a consultant, your knowledge of technology and what you did to create these data centers and all this. You were uniquely positioned to be able to make a significant contribution to Hancock Bank and to the community. And it probably was some of the best development you could have gotten. It probably made you a way better CEO as a result of that experience.
Well, there were a lot of attributes. I guess every cloud has a silver lining, right? And coming through the storm, the need to make, field level decisions that were really above your pay grade was not unique to me or you. This happened all over the coast and through many businesses and elected officials, that we just had to make the best call we could make. So it was a good development exercise. I remember, one moment in time, and George having just passed a few months ago, I tell a lot of George stories because he's on my mind. But I can remember borrowing machines from Trustmark Bank in Jackson. We had lost, our entire back of the house, and there were these machines that we needed to do our work. And our staff were in Atlanta, and they couldn't come home to tend to their homes because that's where we had our backup center. And Trustmark was kind enough to loan us some of their machines so we could bring our people home. And the building we put them in, the next door building, caught on fire. 5 hours after we put them there, Billy Hughes, who at that time was the Senate Pro Tem, and now the mayor of Gulfport, drove up to Jackson in the middle of the night with me in a box truck. We carried those machines down the stairs at that bank, installed them in a temporary building, ran cable to them, and I was so excited to tell our people in Atlanta, you can finally come home. And then I got a radio call at 3 a.m. that the building was on fire. It turned out it was the building next door. And George was helping with Chief Sullivan direct the fire hoses over the building, so I and a few of my colleagues could run in and out of that building under the arcs of the water to carry those machines out, still in the shipping plastic we had them in, so we could bring our people home the next day. That's not the kind of thing you do every day as a banker, but I can remember the lessons learned during that time. And one of my favorite pictures hanging on the wall of my office is a picture of George and I standing together after being up all night doing that. I'm not sure who looked older, me or George, but I think it was me.
Hey, listen, the tribute show that I did in the wake of George's untimely death, where you participated heavily in helping make it really great. So many wonderful voices involved in that. It was viewed thousands of times. And I quote him all the time because, he was so much to you. For me in the community, he meant a lot to me as well. We've been through so many chapters together. But the one thing that he said in that show, I repeat all the time, when I ask, how do you want to be remembered? And he said, I don't want to be remembered. I just want to know the things that I was involved in continue. And if those things have a role in bringing people back to the coast, then I will have achieved what I wanted to achieve, whether my name was attached to it or not. What a powerful thing to say. He's so self-aware, and he really believed it, didn't he?
Yeah. Hey, George was born at a tough time in his family's history. His father died not long when he was a little boy, died, and George ended up being the primary earner of the house when he was 14, selling vegetables in central Gulfport along Highway 90 at the marinas. And that builds a lot of character and a lot of responsibility. And so he worked hard his whole life. And in fact, the night or the early morning that he passed, and George was in his early 80s, and he was still pretty vigorous. But like many people, I didn't want him falling off a ladder at 82 and breaking a hip or a shoulder and setting him back. And so he would go down to our vault where we have all our archives, and we were putting together the 125th anniversary activities for coming up in October. And we were looking at archives that we would display the month of October. And I told him, please don't go to the vault by yourself and get up on a ladder. If you fall, it may be 2 days before anybody knows to look for you there. He said, right, okay, I will. And I was traveling. And my team member, Jennifer, here called me when I was traveling and said, George is in the vault again. I'm sure he's on the ladder. And I told him, just tell him, don't get on the ladder, identify everything, and I'll be there in the morning and we'll go through it together. And then he passed. And so
yeah, gosh,
so sad I didn't get to have that Friday morning meeting with him. I'll always regret that we missed it.
I know that. I know you feel that way. We're at the end of the segment. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with John Hairston. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I'm so thrilled to have my friend John Hairston, CEO. It's great to catch up with John because, as I said, we've been through so many chapters of our lives together. And, I would say this discussion we were having about George Schloegel was important to me because he was always so inspiring to me, and had that opportunity to have a couple of shows with him not long before he died. But in terms of being a mentor, there probably was no other mentor that was that was ahead of George Schloegel as it relates to you, John. Is that true?
Yeah, he was. Well, Leo taught me a lot about the banking business. And George taught me a lot about life and about people, and a lot of my best lessons were, from that time. And George was, given his level of maturity, he was born in 1940. And so he was kind of a World War II baby, if you will.
Yeah.
And so many of the characteristics of the greatest generation, George also displayed. So he was a lot like my dad. He was a little younger than my dad. My dad was, I guess, 12 years younger than George, or older than George. They said a lot of the same things. So when I lost my dad, George kind of became that mentor about life to me. And so, that's probably some of my sweetest memories of some of the lessons about people and marriage and fatherhood and how do you work with people. And but I give him and Leo pretty much equal marks, but two different subject matters.
Hey, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but when I left the Sun Herald, I didn't have a chance to clean out all my files, and because I wanted to leave everything for the next publisher. But there was one file that I regretted to this day, and that is it was a file full of handwritten notes from Leo. Leo would write me a lot, but it was never email form. He would always write it in a note, from a wide variety of subjects, sometimes commenting about the newspaper. He was obviously extremely focused on Stennis and, that whole science and math thing and whatever. But I regret it because that would be valuable today to be able to put those in some kind of a book and share them with other people. But, man, he was a special dude.
Yeah, and the notes were on 8.5 by 14.
Yes.
Lined paper, front and back, so he didn't waste any paper. Remember that?
That's you've gotten a few of those notes yourself.
I've got a file of them. I sure do.
So, John, your bank, we'll come to this in just a few minutes ago, but I shared with you something that was written back in May about the positive catalyst for your bank moving forward. We'll get back to that in just a second, but things have been going good for you guys. But I wanted to make sure for people who don't know about Hancock Whitney, give them a sense of what this bank that originated in Hancock, as Hancock in Gulfport, the way this thing has evolved across multiple states.
Okay, I'm glad to share it. It's actually a pretty good American business story. I mean, we were founded as a fledgling organization in downtown Bay St. Louis. Not long after, the same investors put together another small bank in New Orleans called the Bank of Orleans. That Bank of Orleans eventually became part of Whitney, and Hancock County Bank became Hancock Bank. And they were very close organizations over a period of time. So no small wonder 100 years later, Hancock and Whitney eventually got back together if you will, to become the named company we are today. But the big catalyst for our growth was Katrina. I mean, we went into that storm I guess what we call them in the business, we call them super community banks, larger community banks, at about $3 billion. And four months later, we were $5 billion. And 2 years later, we acquired a bank in Florida that was a failed bank in Panama City and became $9 billion. And then the Whitney transaction happened and we became $18 billion. And that was in 2012. We closed that deal, or 11. Yeah, 2011 we closed that deal, and have doubled since that point in time. And so the footprint is from as far south as Sarasota over to Jacksonville is the far eastern part of our franchise. We have offices in Atlanta and Nashville now that are specialty lending offices, all the way over to Austin and San Antonio. So, but the headquarters is still right where it's been for the better part of 100 years in Gulfport.
It's an amazing story, man. It's amazing. It's been fun watching you and your team. It's been educational watching you and your team sort of navigate this difficult situation. You know, it's interesting that you grew the bank at a time when banks were so significantly challenged.
That's the game, right? If you can be in strong position when periods of weakness occur, then whoever's got the strength, particularly capital, to do it is the winner, and you grow, right? So most of our big growth has, as you said, happened during the worst of times. But I mean, all that credit goes to the team. I mean, my job is I'm kind of like the traffic management guy. I mean, all the talent is in the team, down the chain of command. And I've been blessed with some very tenured, extremely talented, and wildly committed and passionate people who believe in the company story and believe in the values that the company has clung to now for 125 years in October. So the credit goes to the team. I mean, I think a better CEO might be $100 billion right now versus 35, but we've been very fortunate to have some super people, and really clients have stuck with us during some of those difficult times.
Yeah, it's been something to watch. One of the beauties of being in your position, though, you get a chance to not only understand what's happening economically from a national perspective, but certainly throughout the region that you just described, from Jacksonville over to Austin. Let's kind of break it all down a little bit. Let's start with coastal Mississippi and what you see in coastal Mississippi. Then we'll talk a little bit about the state and what's happening with the state, major economic development projects, et cetera. And then we'll get into the region that you're doing banking in. So let's start with coastal Mississippi. What do you see here?
So the coast is unfortunately not a really high growth market. Part of the reason for that is just simple geography. We're not a circle, we're a line, right? We're 40 miles long, and we're only about 8 or 10 miles thick. And so as a result, it's kind of hard to get the growth outward that you naturally get in a 360-degree circle, because we've only got 180 degrees of physical latitude to work with, and a lot of it's water. And so we have some challenges there. But the biggest need we have to grow the economy of the coast is technology, manufacturing, information, clean industry with a little bit, maybe 30-40% mix of heavy industry. We are a good market for labor. The talent that comes out of our high schools is as good as anywhere in our whole footprint, if not better. People here tend to stay at the same employer a little longer, and we've got a healthy mix of skills and experiences coming into the market, primarily through the military. So we're sort of ready-made for growth. And if I could wave a wand, and this is probably not the best political statement to make, but it's just simple reality. If we could ever get the municipalities, the counties, and our various economic development organizations truly in consensus about how and where we're going to grow our economies, partnered with a statutorily empowered MDA, we can make magic happen on the coast. And I believe it'll happen one day. It's just tough because, we're 3 counties, and those counties have different priorities. And sometimes we as elected officials or business people get so focused on our particular little part of the pie that we miss the opportunity for the larger corpus of growth opportunities. So John, I think it's a coil spring if we can ever get that solved.
Hey, let me say this. One major economic development person told me that the coast is an 800-pound gorilla. If we could ever figure out how to regionally, so he thought in terms of the 6 coast counties. If we could think about how to progress from an economic development point of view with one voice on that region, it would be hard to beat it.
Yeah. I think we're the 800-pound gorilla that doesn't know it. And if you look at the Panhandle of Florida, they did a particularly good job during the financial recession of yelling at the top of their lungs, "We're open."
Yeah.
And so there was this massive influx of people that came and stayed for quite a while during the pandemic. And a lot of them decided to stay and make investments there and move their businesses or set up parts of their businesses there. So one of our fastest growing markets is actually Panhandle, Florida, that looks a lot like us. And so here on the coast. And so I think there's a wonderful opportunity here. And so when I said earlier about getting consensus, I don't mean, merge 6 counties. I mean, have thought leaders kind of develop inside those that think, okay, I've got my local plan and I'm going to have my region plan. And I'm not going to cheat the regional plan just to go deal with the local one and start making some of these bigger investments. I mean, we're going to look back 30 or 40 years from now and realize that we missed, I'm afraid, one of the greatest opportunities is to use all that Deepwater Horizon money for big things to really move employment and education forward on the coast. And it's the last of the free money, so to speak, that we'll be able to deploy. And it's been really tough to see and I'm not saying the money's been misspent. I just don't think it's been spent on those things would generate the biggest kick over 30 or 40 or 50 years.
We'll pick it up from right there when we get back on the other side as we continue our conversation with John Hairston from Hancock Whitney. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I want to say how much I enjoy visiting with my friend John Hairston, the CEO of Hancock Whitney. It's always good to catch up with him. We were talking about sort of this, if you think about the geography of coastal Mississippi, it's actually quite small. And what John is saying that we're not in a trajectory where there's going to be big growth here. We're holding our own, and he's not saying that we're not holding our own. When you look at, for example, the couple of bookends toward Jackson County with Chevron and Ingalls, incredibly important bookends, the Stennis Space Center and the blue chip industries that are part of that, gaming in between, gaming holding its own quite well considering the growing competition in America. The point, though, is that we could be more. We could aspire for more. We were chatting off the air about areas like the Golden Triangle here in Mississippi and the kind of massive development they've been able to attract. But just beyond Mississippi, when you see areas within the area that you're responsible for between Austin and Jacksonville, when you see areas that are evolving rapidly, what you usually find is there's a consensus around some vision of what is possible. That's true, isn't it, John?
It is, and it's a long-term consensus, and it's not without risk. And so, and I think unfortunately, and this is unfortunate, but we've had our share of bad luck. While Katrina left behind a few gifts, it was a massive and destructive event that upended a lot of the development we had going on. And then Deepwater Horizon was the same sort of interruption. And so we've had our share of bad luck. And I think we've done a terrific job as a community. Credit goes to elected leaders, to business people, to all the people that kind of stepped up during those times to recover as quickly as we did. So I'm really, I think, talking more about the peacetime plan, without these big, huge events that sort of get in the way of our thinking sometimes, to think through what the definition of success looks like 25 years from now. And I think that's the part, we think about you use some of the names, the thought to giving up a whole bunch of taxable land to create a space center. I mean, the people that did that, they didn't live long enough to see the real payback.
Yeah.
The implementation of the Ingalls shipyard expansion, the Chevron refinery being one of the largest in the country, maybe the largest in the country, those things didn't immediately kind of just catch. It took whole decades for it to grow and scale up to these monstrous beneficial implementations that we have now. So I guess I'm thinking about what are those big things. Gaming is not one business, but it's an industry that we didn't have. At least we didn't have taxes on it, pre-1990. but now it's the anchor of our hospitality industry. And so when starting to think about the next 20 or 25 years, what is that next 2 or 3 big catalytic events that occur to create a very robust economy? Because I'll tell you, the education system is top end. I would compare our public education system to any public education system in our footprint. The quality of the workforce, the work ethic, the character of the workforce is just as good or better here than anywhere else in our footprint. So some of those ingredients that you really wish you had, we already have. So I think it comes down to us as leaders thinking about what we want 2 decades to look like down the road. That's hard to keep focus on when we have so many other distractions in our lives. But
yeah, it is. It is. Listen, quality of life, cost of living. Jordan, my son Jordan is a real estate lawyer here on the coast, and the majority of the closings they do today tend to be cash and from people outside the area. So people are coming here. They're coming here because they love it here. Hey, listen, one thing I'll cite, because I think it's important when you think about education. Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, regular listeners will get tired of me saying this, but I think it's so important because it shows strategic focus. When you think about Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College and how strong they are relative to others like them in the nation, over 50% of the students there today are in non-traditional education because of their reaching out to partners like Ingalls and Chevron and others to say, how can we fit the needs? That is innovative.
Well, Mississippi as a state, and I know there's others in the country that do a good job with this, but Mississippi as a state is a top performer in terms of community education, between senior level university and high school. And that's not only as a bridge to senior, but also for vocational careers. And we really are particularly good at it. And as you said, the Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College has really made a growth strategy out of vocational assistance and program assistance for some of the larger employers. And we're going to need more of it. Now, I'm telling you, as an employer, we have hundreds of jobs across this country that I would love to have here if we could just find enough people to go into those roles. And so because of some of this lesson learned from Katrina, not having everything in one building like we did in the old days, but there are concentrations of staff we have around the country in pockets that are there because it's hard to find those skill sets here. Well, every time the coast gets bigger, the ability to attract those types of people gets better. And from a quality of life viewpoint, I think, when I left here in 1981, when I finished high school at Gulfport High, I never dreamed that I would have an opportunity to come back home. My degree was in chemical engineering. There were really only 2 places to go, which was in those days Dow or DuPont, which became Chemours, and now and Chevron. Those were the only 2 games in town for chemical engineers. It's much broader than that now. And the quality of life then wasn't nearly as good as it is now with all these different features. And I know we were talking before the show, just the bridges rebuilt after Katrina have become attractions by themselves because of the walk paths that joined the 3 counties together. So, the boardwalk in Hairston County is not a morning goes by. I don't care how early I come to work. If it's at daybreak, there's 100 people walking on that boardwalk. So it's not a bad place to live. And I think as we get more of our high school talent that goes off to school and decides to come back, that's going to provide more opportunities to improve our workforce, or at least our volume of workforce here.
It really is. And listen, I look at what's happening in our state with the Amazon multi-billion-dollar investment in Mississippi and others like that. Tate Reeves and the state of Mississippi has really put a stake in the dirt to say he's going to be an economic development governor. He believes that if you can get the tide to rise, it will lift all boats, and it's true, it will. It's great to see this, isn't it?
It is, and look, nobody, you never get all your citizens that love whoever your governor is at one point in time, but you have to acknowledge the last 3 governors that we've had have all put a significant portion of their time into economic development. Governor Barber, was tasked with the recovery of Katrina too, but we made hay even with that, right? So I think we've had 3 successful governors at growing opportunities for employment in the state. And that win for Amazon in the general amount of IT related or technology related investment and the Metro Jackson area is enormously impactful because, I mean, we needed that catalyst, right? I mean, we needed something to put that market on the map, and that degree of fiber optic capacity and the having implementations that are technology related in our state, and particularly in the Jackson area, is enormously impactful for the future. And so I can tell you, I get questions when I'm on the road from people that haven't when they would ask me about Jackson, it was about some of the advertised or the media covered water challenges we had, sometimes law enforcement issues that we've had. Now they're asking me about this sudden focus of IT in Jackson. What is all that about? That's good press, to have for the state and particularly for the Jackson area.
It really is. Any other thing you want to say about the state of Mississippi before we actually go beyond the state lines of Mississippi?
No, I think the only thing, I guess, to cap it off, depending on which census information you believe, I'm either a sixth or a seventh, maybe even an eighth generation Mississippian. Some of the family documentation gets a little weak, but it's been a couple of hundred years that there have been Hairstons roaming about, or Hairstons, as we recall back in those days around the state. And there were things about our history that I wasn't proud of, and I'm still not, some of those moments. But I have a lot more to be proud of for my lifetime, born in Mississippi, a Mississippian. We've done so many things right the last 20 or 30 years, and I'm really proud of the state that we seem to be becoming. I really am. And so moving on to the footprint. So across our area, generally the southeastern United States has been the winning region of the country. The pandemic, I think, exacerbated that goodness. So with really just one or two exceptions, even the larger MSAs in the Southeast opened up pretty quickly and robustly, and I think they were the recipients of all that inflow of traffic. So, people that wanted to go to the West Coast or New York to catch a show or whatever couldn't go because they just simply weren't open, and so they came here. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, a lot of people buying homes are not from here, but they're moving here. And some of that is because the price points are a little better. In Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, the price points for houses are better, i.e. you get more for your money than you do in historically high tourism areas like South Florida.
So why don't we do this when we come back on the other side? We'll finish the conversation around what's going on beyond Mississippi as it relates to the economic situation. And then we'll let John tell us a little bit about what the future looks like for his bank. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my friend John Hairston from the Hancock Whitney, CEO, and we've sort of looked at Mississippi. We've begun to have a conversation about the larger geography that the bank is located in, from Austin to Jacksonville. So how do you see things sort of playing out over the next year or so, John?
Well, the macro environment is going to be the primary driver of good or bad in our region. I think our region's ahead of the rest of the country in most ways. But I mean, the two biggest influencers that are, the word influencer means something different now, Ricky, than it did, when you and I were kids, right? It
does.
So to hijack that word for this point, there are two huge influencers that will drive the trends in the southeast part of the U.S. One of them is interest rates, and the second one is consumer confidence. And as we sit right now, the rate environment has been somewhat, it's viewed as volatile, but it really isn't. And our interest rates we have right now are actually below what the 50-year median is. But we went through 20 years of interest rates being basically zero. So there's kind of a shock to the current generation for, 5 or 6 or even 8% money seems high, right? When you get into mortgages or business investments, rates are not going to go down soon. Just 90 or 120 days ago, the various economists that make up the CME future forecast for funds rates overnight, I believe we'd have six rate decreases in 2024. That was never going to happen. And we viewed the most of that being 3. So as we sit right now, the expectations are that interest rates will not go down until September, at which point they'll go down about 25 basis points. And within a year, we should see rates down 50 or 75 basis points. That's not a lot. So I think we're going to buckle in here as an economy for interest rates that are maybe within 100 basis points of where we are right now, unless the economy heads into a slide. And if that happens, it'll be because of that second influential topic, which is consumer confidence. Right now, people still feel pretty good. They're grumpy. I think we're all grumpier than we went into the pandemic feeling, but now we're all a little short-tempered than we were in 2019. But people argue about politics and what's going on the global military arena and all sorts of different manners, but they don't necessarily feel afraid right now. And so they're still spending money, taking vacations, trading up their cars, all that sort of thing. Not at the crazy clip we had 2 years ago, but still a very solid pace. So the Fed's desires to get to a 2% inflation rate, right, and just lots of inflation factors, but we're about at 2.8 for the one they look at the most. It's heading down towards 2, and we still have robust creation of jobs, although it is peaking. So the two big influences are consumer confidence and interest rates, and rates will get better, but not a lot unless things go kind of to head to a worse place. So the three predictions I'll give you, Ricky, you heard it here first on your show. There's three things that are going to happen over the next several years that are pretty monumental. And whether they're good or bad is subject for debate. But number one is the United States government basically bailed us all out, businesses and individuals, during the pandemic by borrowing money to put in our various pockets to keep the economy going. It shouldn't have been necessary because we shut down too hard and too long as an economy, but hindsight's 2020 now, but we did. So we issued trillions and trillions of dollars of new debt. The government's got to pay interest on that debt, and it's at the current rates, not the zero environment that we had 3 years ago. So as a result, about 50% of all of our collected tax money, all of it, goes to servicing the current debt that we have. So government spending will have to come down, or taxes have to go up. So my three predictions are, over the next few years, doesn't matter who the president is going to be or the president after that, we will see tax increases. It'll happen primarily for the wealthy and for businesses, and then it'll drift out of the middle class if that's not enough. But that's going to happen. It's going to have to happen because we simply have too much debt. Number two, we will see a need for more people to join the employment workforce that are capable of working. So the benefits for people that are not working will likely go down if they're able to work. I'm not talking about retirees and individuals who are physically or mentally, because of illnesses or injury, not able to work. But for employable people, the benefit to not work will go down to encourage them to rejoin the workforce and therefore become a net producer of taxes versus a net user of taxes. Okay. And then the third thing that's going to happen is the amount of investment back in the infrastructure of the country will be curtailed for a period of time. And so as a result, we're going to go through a period where for 20 years, the government's been doing massive projects around the country. Not going to have the cash flow to do that unless we see a huge change in the macro economy that I really don't see coming. So I think that's probably what we're going to see. And I'll give you the fourth bonus prediction, and that is there's the need for jobs, the need for people to fill jobs is going up at a pace that the birth rate doesn't support. So the only answer to that is immigration. So the country will sooner or later realize that we have the proper level of immigration right now to fill the jobs. It's just too high in the percentage of undocumented, therefore unemployable by businesses like yours and ours. But we desperately need people to man those positions. So we will see a reasonable, I think practical, enforceable immigration reform that makes it easier for legal people to immigrate to the U.S. and be employable, and harder for people to illegally immigrate and actually get benefits that are on cost of the taxpayers. So
yeah, I'm
certain about, and the fourth one I think is going to happen.
The fourth one, I hope,
in the next 5 or 6 years.
I hope and pray the fourth one happens, because I'm for legal immigration. We got to wrestle that one to the ground. Listen, City said you guys were cold spring, ready to take advantage of the opportunities. I know that to be the case. You got a great leadership team. You're a terrific leader yourself. Good luck to you guys as y'all continue to grow that bank.
Well, thank you. We've been dealt a good hand by the economy and by the markets we operate in. We've been very blessed to come out of some of the the difficult times. We're better capitalized than we have been in 50 years. I'd like to have better growth than we have right now, but people aren't borrowing as much as they used to borrow, 2 or 3 years ago. So, but I think what we'll see happen is continued growth over time. And I think I may have said on one of your shows a few years ago that if I look at the top 25 banks in the Southeast 25 years ago, 20 of them are gone. And so we're one of the 25, one of the 5 still left. When we look at that list then, my expectation is that 25 years from now, we're still here. And as a result, have to be a much larger organization. So, Mississippi needs some strong banks to propel the state forward, and Hancock Whitney plans to be one of them.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, man. Thank you for taking the time. I know that the listeners will enjoy getting this perspective. This has been John Hairston, CEO of Hancock Whitney. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.